Welcome to the Archaeology Studio. Today's episode considers the archaeologist as a character in works of fiction, and specifically when using the archaeologist background in the world's greatest role-playing game, Dungeons & Dragons. If you are an archaeologist concerned about how your profession is portrayed in popular fiction and games, or if you are a content creator curious about how to portray an archaeologist, then this video is for you. If you happen to like the world of Dungeons & Dragons, then this video will be even more useful for you. Here, I will explore how to maximize the archaeologist as a character within the fantasy adventure genre. Toward this goal, I will consider how to build a character through the existing archaeologist background in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. You could imagine how a group of adventurous characters may need to explore an old site ruin, search for an ancient relic, or follow the clues of an arcane mystery or legend from a forgotten age. In these situations, the adventurers just may benefit from the skills and knowledge of an archaeologist. Additionally, perhaps an archaeologist is working against the heroes in the story. In any case, the archaeologist background offers a base startup for building this kind of character. You could find inspiration for an archaeologist character in the numerous heroes and villains of popular movies, television shows, and games. I made a separate video about the differences between archaeologists in fiction and in reality. I will not reiterate all of those details here, but I should clarify two thematic categories. First is the most popular portrayal that you all know as the treasure hunter archaeologist. Second is the less popular but overall more realistic portrayal of the intensive researcher archaeologist. For the most useful and interesting character, I would encourage to draw from both the treasure hunting and the researching aspects of archaeology. For a purely treasure hunting style of archaeologist, the primary motivation is for obtaining material objects that can be sold for money, or that can be used as religious relics, magical weapons, or some other purpose. A treasure hunter could accomplish these goals without actually knowing anything about archaeology research. You could imagine a team of treasure hunters bursting into a royal tomb and stealing a magnificent golden sarcophagus, only later learning that they had unleashed a terrible curse. For the researcher style of archaeologist, the primary motivation is for learning knowledge or solving a mystery. A researcher archaeologist might encounter a royal tomb with a golden sarcophagus, immediately identify the age and original context of the sarcophagus, and then proceed to ignore it while preparing a detailed map of the site, establishing a grid, and recording the positions of every broken piece of ancient pottery and stone tool fragment. For creating an archaeologist character in Dungeons & Dragons, or generally in any work of fiction, I recommend to consider how the treasure hunting and researching themes can work together, or perhaps against each other. An archaeologist can be both a hero and a villain. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, the rules provide a ready-made startup background for an archaeologist character. The archaeologist background provides access to a few extra proficiencies and benefits that otherwise would not be included in the character features of a wizard, a rogue, or any other heroic class or archetype in the world of Dungeons & Dragons. In other words, the archaeologist background alone does not enable a character to cast magical spells or to swing heavy two-handed weapons. Rather, the background adds depth and motivation for the character, and it unlocks a few extra supporting features and practical skills. In my opinion, the background option of an archaeologist works quite well in Dungeons & Dragons. The design is overall accurate, and you could interpret it for building a treasure hunter, a researcher, or your own combination of those categories. The archaeologist background offers two skill proficiencies, including history and survival. The history proficiency is suitable for an archaeologist who should be knowledgeable about past events, people, and places. The survival proficiency is a key skill for any archaeologist who has explored in the wilderness for an extended period of time, and who has learned how to identify subtle differences in soil formations, vegetation growth, and other features in the environment that reflect ancient activities from hundreds or thousands of years ago. I agree that an archaeologist character should be proficient in history and survival as base requirements, but then you still would need to add other proficiencies for a full sense of the character that you want to develop. I like how the archaeologist background offers a bonus of a tool proficiency, either in cartographer's tools or in navigator's tools. In real life, all archaeologists need to know how to use maps, and most archaeologists make their own maps. Additionally, archaeologists often need to work with ancient maps that may be difficult to decipher. For the archaeologists who specialize in shipwrecks or underwater sites, the navigator's tool proficiency would be suitable. Next, the archaeologist background offers proficiency in one extra language. You could imagine that an archaeologist learned to read and write in a language of relevance for a particular investigation site or region. If you want to build a character who knows multiple languages, then you would need to access those abilities through a different means other than the archaeologist background. With the Dust Digger feature, every archaeologist keeps one special item from a prior excavation or other adventure. The official listing here was designed for the idea of a treasure hunting archaeologist, and accordingly the Dust Digger items are things like a medallion, a shovel, or a whip. All of those options could work just fine, and I would add or at least allow more. I would suggest a map, a set of drawings, a letter, or an unfinished book from a lost or deceased colleague that offers clues about an ancient artifact, about a mysterious site or vanished civilization, or about a scientific hypothesis that has not yet been tested. The archaeologist background gives one more feature of historical knowledge. In this case, the archaeologist character can enter into any site of ancient ruins and identify the origins and purpose of the construction. The second part of the historical knowledge feature allows an archaeologist to assess the monetary value of any artworks that are more than 100 years old. I would interpret that a research-oriented archaeologist could identify the age and the ancient contextual association of an object, and then assess the potential value of learning knowledge and sharing those results in a museum exhibit or in a book. The archaeologist background offers several possible personality characteristics of ideals, bonds, and flaws. Most of these suggestions could work especially for a treasure hunting character, but I encourage to think of different ideas of your own. Looking at the written description for an archaeologist background, the given proficiencies and features are useful for the most basic and generalized skills of any archaeologist. But they are incomplete until you can add a few more choices through the other parts of the character building process. In real life, the daily work of an archaeologist demands close observation during field exploration, surveying, site recording, excavation, analysis of artifacts, and any other task of the profession. In the mechanics of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, the observation skills of an archaeologist would translate into proficiency in the perception skill. I should mention that an archetypal treasure hunting archaeologist might not need proficiency in perception, and instead the survival proficiency and other situational features would suffice. In my view of knowing what an archaeologist actually does in real life, I would suggest to obtain proficiency in perception and investigation. Those skills would enable an archaeologist to perform professional research. You might consider to add proficiency in Arcana if your campaign setting involves ancient magical treasures and secrets of lost civilizations. You may have noticed that my model of a research archaeologist relies mostly on skills and proficiencies in wisdom and intelligence. If you want to build a treasure hunting archaeologist, then I would suggest to look for proficiencies in stealth, sleight of hand, and acrobatics that all are dexterity-based proficiencies. In Dungeons & Dragons, a character may learn a special feat at different levels, and at least a few of those feats could work well for an archaeologist. Among the feat options, Dungeon Delver is perfect for the dexterity-based treasure hunting archaeologist who may not have invested in the perception and investigation skills. This feat gives special ability for detecting hidden doors and traps inside a dungeon, even when moving at a fast pace. For a researcher archetype of archaeologist, I would recommend to start with the Observant Feat. Most archaeologists in real life are keenly aware of their surroundings at all times. This feat adds +1 to either intelligence or wisdom score, and it adds +5 for all passive perception and investigation checks. Additionally, you can lip read from a distance. Especially if you are building a research archaeologist with emphasis in intelligence and wisdom, then this Observant Feat could be powerful, and you probably will not need the Dungeon Delver feat unless you are building a treasure hunting character. Whether you choose the research archaeologist or the treasure hunting archaeologist or some combination, this character would be most strong in the exploration aspects of Dungeons & Dragons, most suitable for a rogue, a ranger, or a monk. For a purely treasure hunting character, the rogue would be optimal. For more of a research-oriented character, the rogue still would be a strong choice, while the ranger and the monk would become more viable. If your archaeologist character wants to use magic abilities, then even more possibilities could be considered. An archaeologist generally would not perform well during strength-based hand-to-hand combat or enduring through heavy physical damage as you would expect for a fighter, a paladin, a barbarian, or a blood hunter. You still could try this approach, perhaps with a dexterity-based finesse duelist or archer, but the other character options in Dungeons & Dragons would be more practical. For a spellcasting archaeologist, a few low-level spells could be all that your character needs. One of the most useful spells would be the Light cantrip for visibility inside a dungeon or a cave. Personally, I prefer the Dancing Lights cantrip that an archaeologist would use as a remote-controlled light source, exploring through the site in a perfectly measured grid pattern while recording those observations in a 1:10 scale ratio in a map. Additionally, an archaeologist could use magic to investigate an ancient site, a mysterious artifact, or bizarre drawings and glyphs with the aid of ritual spells such as Detect Magic, Identify, and Comprehend Languages, all at first level and all without making any attack rolls or ability checks. An archaeologist character might access these low-level magic abilities through feats, such as the Magic Initiate feat or the Ritual Caster feat. But naturally, a formal spellcasting class would be considerably more powerful, especially if it could link with the wisdom and intelligence-based skills of an archaeologist. The charisma-based spellcasters of Sorcerer, Warlock, and Bard could be difficult to manage simply because the charisma score would compete against the other traits of an archaeologist character. Nonetheless, I could imagine a high charisma scoring archaeologist feeling frustrated about failing with low ability scores in wisdom and maybe dexterity, then making a Warlock's pact with an otherworldly patron in order to gain magical powers. A Bard of the College of Lore is tempting with the archaeologist's background, building on the concept that ancient lore and archaeology could work well together. Most of the classic spellcasting and other ability of bards in musical performance are not so useful for the specific tasks of an archaeologist, but a bard does have the capacity to excel in several skill proficiencies. A bard could start with mediocre ability scores in intelligence and wisdom, then still gain impressive proficiency bonuses in the archaeologist's startup skills of survival and history, plus in other skills such as arcana, perception, and investigation. For a spellcaster archaeologist, a cleric of the Arcana domain could channel arcane magic with aspects of divine power for unlocking ancient secrets. For this character, the ritual caster feat in the wizard spell list would provide extra utility in the exploration and investigation tasks of archaeology. An archaeologist with a good wisdom score could become a druid. A classic research theme in archaeology involves the long-term relationship between people and nature, and this theme would be compatible with a druid. This character could use the druid's wild shape ability to transform into a beast with a burrowing speed for excavating an archaeological site. As an intelligence-based spellcaster, a wizard could make good use of the archaeologist background, but the results would be focused on practical utilities magic of cantrips and first-level ritual spells. The most useful utility cantrips would be Light, Dancing Lights, Encode Thoughts, Mage Hand, Mending, Message, and Mold Earth. The most useful first-level ritual spells would be Detect Magic, Identify, Comprehend Languages, Find Familiar, Floating Disc, Illusory Script, and Unseen Servant. This spell list is superb for an archaeologist, but it would be profoundly disappointing for most wizards. An Artificer would be interesting for an archaeologist. In fact, many archaeologists are fond of working with gadgets and sometimes making their own tools. Perhaps this character is hunting for ancient artifacts and knowledge that would help to create the ultimate Artificer infusions and inventions. So far, I have found the Artificer to be underpowered in Dungeons & Dragons, except for the newest subclass of an Armorer Artificer, who maybe is searching for artifacts to enhance a suit of armor. In my view, this character might develop into a strong villain. For an archaeologist character with emphasis mostly in practical skills and not so much in magic, you might consider building a monk, a ranger, or a rogue. You may not have anticipated a monk as an archaeologist, but this choice works surprisingly well in the game mechanics of Dungeons & Dragons. In particular, a monk of the Way of the Shadow could move through an ancient site without disturbing anything, make important observations, possibly retrieve an object of special value, and then escape without a trace. The backstory origins of a monk archaeologist probably would involve a monk order or temple that is linked with ancient traditions and possibly ancient artifacts. The Ranger offers a reasonable compatibility with most of the skills and themes of an archaeologist. When I was preparing this video, I checked in a few different websites that test for a person's abilities and characteristics, and every time, my result was a Ranger. In the test that provided more details, I was a true neutral human Ranger at 7th level. I can agree that the exploration skills of an archaeologist match quite well with a Ranger, and I can admit that I prefer to work alone in the wilderness most of the time. Unfortunately, the Ranger in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition has been problematic. The problems mostly have been corrected if you want to use the newest options of a Gloomstalker Ranger or a Fey Wanderer Ranger. Thematically, I could imagine that an archaeologist was recruited as an agent into the Fey Wanderer Conclave, and I could imagine something similar for a Gloomstalker archaeologist. All of the various options of a rogue could be effective for an archaeologist character. The Arcane Trickster rogue could be delightful as an antagonistic villain archaeologist. For a heroic archaeologist, I prefer the Inquisitive rogue. In my view, the Inquisitive rogue gives exactly what I want to see for a research archaeologist, for a treasure hunting archaeologist, or for any combination of research and treasure hunting. For maximizing the potential of an archaeologist character, the Inquisitive rogue is my first choice. My second choice is a tie between a bard of the College of Lore and a cleric of the Arcana domain. My next choice is a three-way tie of an Arcane Trickster rogue, a monk of the Way of the Shadow, and a ranger of either the Gloomstalker or the Fey Wanderer subclass. For all of these possibilities, I would consider the Observant Feat and the Ritual Caster Feat. In this exercise, I was thinking of a character that could be effective immediately at 1st level, and then deliver special powers by 5th level. In this case, the variant human seemed to work best, and I did not even consider multi-classing combinations. What are your thoughts, though, about developing a gnome, dwarf, or other option, or about building a multi-class archaeologist at higher levels? Was this presentation helpful for building an archaeologist as a character? How would you work within this kind of framework or modify with your own contributions? As always, please remember to subscribe to this channel, tell your friends about it, and see new videos every month with the Archaeology Studio.